Welcome back. It's Trail Finder 2 time, and today we're going to be taking a look at this gorgeous 1/10 scale ready to run K5 Blazer Midnight Edition from RC4WD. And this thing is gorgeous, but as always, I've already put a few of my own little touches on this to personalize it and to bring it up to my ready to run standards, if you will. So without further delay, let's take a closer look. All right, let's start at the exterior here. So as always, I like to do some personalization on the graphics, paint scheme, scale details. So with this one, I started at the front and decided to black out the grille and bumper, but RC4WD has done that already for me. So moving on, I thought, it'd be cool to smoke all the lenses. They did that too. Check. Blacked out mirrors, check. Man, well, I could add some scale detail with some real metal emblems. Damn it, they beat me to it with those as well. So man, they are really stepping up the game as far as what you're getting right out of the box in this TF2 package. At least from prior releases that I've owned, you've had to add a lot of this detail yourself. So let's check and see what's under the hood here. So I can get this open one-handed, kind of pull forward. So this has the real metal hinges, which is super nice here. And you can see all this nice detail in there. So let's take a closer look at that. A little bit clearer view here. So what this comes with from the RTR kit, you get the engine bay and you get most of all the wiring here, the dress-up kit. So what I've added to that is what they call the accessory kit. So that comes with the kind of interior side panels here on each side, the jack and tools, this air box and canister, a couple of hoses that run over, I believe this is for the AC maybe, and you get a belt here that connects it. So a few little added details to kind of finish it all out, but the stickers and, like I say, most all the hoses and the meticulous work is done for you by RC4WD, so that is super cool. And a little shot here of the rear we haven't really checked out, but again, we've got these sweet smoked lenses from the factory, the black bumper, and the nice metal emblem there. So lots of value there. This back plastic or glass actually opens up and the tailgate actually folds down. So really cool functionality there. So really that left me with one thing to add to the exterior. And of course, that's my Texas plate in the special edition black to match. And I thought Wicked K5 was an apt moniker for this guy because I think it does look pretty wicked. So speaking of looking pretty wicked, let's take a look underneath, and that will lead us to the stance, kind of the wheels and tires here, the next little mod section, if you will. Before we get the body off, I guess the one thing that we haven't really looked at from the RTR side is these sweet wheels. So I really like these deep dish black rally wheels that it came with, and nice width. They're 1.9, so they seem a little odd because I'm always used to seeing these with 1.55s or 1.7s. But the reason I don't have them on there is because I ended up tweaking the suspension a little bit. So I've lowered the whole thing down. I've added the shackle reverse kit on the front, so that means the axle, instead of moving forward when you flex, it actually moves back like it should. So that actually pushes the tire a little further back into this already hard to deal with Blazer fender line. So very boxy, but the body curves in, so it gets tight right here. So that's just notoriously hard in real life, and I guess on the models as well. In the rear, you can see this one, when it flexes up, this axle moves back because it's already set up, kind of like how I switched the front. So this edge gets closer to the rear here again as we get stuffed. which is kind of hard to see with me blocking it, but let me get it compressed. But you can see how tight it is there. So these guys are snaking by. So what I did was go to a 0 offset wheel. So these are SSD, I guess the D-hole steel wheels with the beadlock rings. And the tires on there are the same height, basically, but narrower. So with that positive offset or 0 offset, everything sits in, so it tucks nice into the fender. And you can see there, we're tucking in, we're not hitting it. So this guy just was getting all into the fender on any kind of steering here in the front with the lowering and that kind of mod I did there on the front. So that kind of led me to swap the wheels and tires, and I'm really digging it though. I really like the smaller rims on these vehicles, and just getting the tires stuffed up in here, getting it low. I'm really digging that as well. A little more aggressive kind of trail look with these tires and wheels. These are RC4WD drive, what are they, rock stompers. So they're not licensed, but they look kind of super swamperish. Pretty old school design here. I think that fits the Blazer well, but just really, really happy with the suspension and the feel now that it's lowered, kind of the ride height. And for the shocks, these are those new shocks with the X-Ring tech and I guess the nitride coated shafts that are kind of gold. But you can't buy these yet individually. They just come on the newer RTRs. But super nice. So I've got these actually filled fully with 30 weight oil, no springs in them. And they are just cushy, like super smooth, no leaking. So really liking these new shocks versus the old ones that were, you basically just had them on there for show. So now these are full of fluid and feel really nice and smooth. So with that, I think I'm gonna get the screws out of the side. And yes, I'm using the stock screws here rather than grub screws. But we'll talk about that and why in a minute. And look at that beauty. We've got a gorgeous engine under the engine. So that is the Hobbywing Fusion Pro, if you don't know. And then I've got that paired up to a 422 HD Reefs V2 servo. And then down here on the front, you can see that shackle reverse kit. So that puts the static point mount for the leaf in the front, and it puts the actual moving link in the rear. So if we get above, you can literally see that axle move backwards there. So the next thing here on the front are these nice inner fenders. So those come with the kit. So again, another little item that they're throwing in the standard RTRs now. So the mod I've done here, you can see obviously on the top, is cut those for these taller shock hoops. So these are the Galande shock hoops. So they allow me to mount that top of shock higher to lower the truck. So that lowered the front end. There's no way to move the shock point on that front axle. So that's the only way I lowered that down a little bit. And then you can see, because of that engine bay tray, I had to sand the top of these off or grind them with the Dremel. So you can see they're not rounded, they kind of slope to the front, and that was to match kind of the profile of the bottom of the tray there. But you've got to take most of it off pretty much down to the shock mount. So it's just above that, but gonna work fine, plenty of metal there. So that is basically the front end. So moving on to the rear, of course, we've got a nice vacancy here where the ESC was, because it's built into this nice 2-in-1 motor up here. And then let's go underneath, and look at that. You don't see anything, do you? Well, I've got the nice RC4WD drive low profile skid installed, so that gets rid of the stock shovel. So that is one thing that they are not including on their kits. And I think almost everyone in existence probably replaces that low skid with either this one or the one that Bauhaus offers. But I would like to see that as a standard part in the future. I don't know why they don't do it. But moving on from that, you can see here I've added an extra little piece to the suspension. So I've got this anti-wrap bar here, and it's just on the driver's side. So it goes from the frame down to the axle. And so what that does is keep the whole axle assembly from twisting and bending your leaf. So if your tire gets bound up and stopped, your axle won't spin and twist these leaves. So that's a nice little mod. You can see under here, so it's a static point here, but it can pivot at the frame, and then it's 2 points, and it can pivot there on the axle. But because of the 2 points, it won't let the axle actually rotate. So that's how it works. And then while we're up here on the front, you can see I've got this, I think this is the V2 Punisher shaft, maybe 90 to 100 in metal. So typically when you put this low profile skid, you've got to add that in because you actually lengthen that front drive shaft. But with this guy, because I also lowered the suspension as I raised the transfer case, I didn't need it, but I'd already bought it, so I put it in. Can't hurt, right? It's metal. So just so you know, you don't need it unless you really have a lot of difference there when you're done with that lift of the transfer case. But look, I've got plenty of engagement, and there's the rear right there. So no change to the rear really. It got maybe a little bit longer, but nothing that you need to replace any kind of drive shaft. And then the sliders are the stock plastic, and of course the body mounts are the nice rectangular rigid ones that kind of lap over the top of the frame there so they can't spin. So that's nice, they're really stout. But you know, the reason that I'm not using the grub screws is because of these inner fenders and the shape of that body. So like I said before, the front end of that Blazer is super boxy and square, and you can see these fenders reflect that. But then you can see at the back, they have to tuck and curve with that body. So I found it really difficult to kind of get this body on. At first, I kind of figured out a good way to get it on now, but when it slides down, it's basically flush with these, and I don't have a real good way to flex it to get it around grub screws that would be protruding. So I think on this one, I'm just gonna resign myself to use the stock screws. And because this is such a heavy body anyways, I feel probably a little bit better having it securely mounted. But I think that right there is basically all the mods to the chassis side. Of course, I'll be running this guy 3S or 2S, that's dependent, I guess. I've got a small battery that'll fit back here for either option. Just gonna see, with all that power, I may step it down to 2S, but what's nice is you've got a bigger BEC to drive that servo in this Fusion Pro. So that is a really great upgrade from the Outcry system it comes with. I believe that's like a 6 amp or 6 volt BEC. So pretty small in the servo world of BECs. But with that, I think let's move on to the final little thing here, which would be alternate wheels and tires. Hold the phone. I just totally lied to you guys. So as I'm swapping wheels and tires, lo and behold, I had forgotten I put on these super sweet brass knuckles from SSD. So now there's a way to actually add some low weight to your TF2 up front. So they offer these for the K44 axles, which are on the Blazer and Scottsdale, I believe. And then they also offer a variant that fits the Yoda 2 axles. So prior to this, there was no brass knuckle option. So that is awesome that SSD is now giving us something for these trucks. So I think I've got these now on all of my TF2s to add a little bit of low weight up front to offset that hard body. But I'm gonna continue on and get the alternates on here, and then we'll talk about those and get some weigh-ins of both of these guys. And here we are with the alternates installed. And again, it's some SSD 1.55 wheels. Got the 8 holes. And as you can see, I've got that nice bit of added detail they offer with the aluminum hubs, the scale rotors there. So those are zero offset as far as affecting the wheel that they're installed on. And these wheels are I guess a negative 3mm offset, so they stick out a little further than the other ones, and you can see that there on the body line. They're not inset as much, but that's because these tires are a little bit smaller in height. So they're able to stick out a little further and have basically the same clearances. So these are RC4 drives, BFG, KM2 mud terrains. So the X2, S3, super soft, super sticky compound. And then I've got Crawl Innovations 1.55 foams in here, just the normal ones. So I think they're like overall height, maybe 4.5. So that's giving these a nice stretch. And I've got the mediums in the front and the firms in the rear for the weight. But what a good look. I mean, totally different than the other more aggressive tires and beadlocks. This is definitely more of a street look. Very clean, but just digging it. Almost a stock look here. Definitely kind of era appropriate. And loving the scale rotor detail. Just awesome that SSD offers little things like that. They offer the scale hubs as well. Those are SSD that I use. Super nice, but really liking that set there. So I think we're gonna weigh both of these sets up, weigh the wheels up. And one thing I didn't mention is this set has brass rings in the front. So a nice option here. These are the newer style. The other set is an older style, and I don't think they offer the brass rings for those. But we'll weigh it up, we'll see the differences here, and we'll come back and look at some articulation. Well, look at that. Basically the same exact weight with both sets, but these guys with the brass rings put it at 58% front bias, whereas the other set were equally weighted, so it's set at 56% front bias. So a good gain right there with just the addition of those guys. So another way to add a little more front bias to this axle besides the knuckles themselves. But got a nice low shot here. Figured we'd flex this out, take a look at the clearance on this set here. Let's see what this can handle here. So a double stack, it's looking good in the rear. Let's go ahead and kind of fully compress it. So that's it right there. So it's just snaking by. Oh, it's perfect. So we're gonna crank the front and jack up this other side. And boy, it's hard to lift those front wheels. I can feel the weight, super heavy. We'll look at that tucking in there. So let's see if we can actually twist this and clear. We may just barely rub. Look at that, looks like it, and that's full compression. But we've got soft compound and we've got a nice compliant foam. So that should be able to turn through, not super knobby, you know, as far as the tread pattern. It looks like the front is no problem because of course that axle is pushed back at full compression there. But man, that looks good, fully stuffed. Really digging that, man. Let's get twisted again here. Very nice. Here's a good comparison shot of the two setups here. So of course this one on the truck looks a little smaller because it's being compressed by the weight of the truck. But they're definitely two different sizes here. So I want to say the Rock Stomper is like a 395, close to 4. And then this one, like I said, is like something around a 385. But I'll put the sizes of both of these up on the screen. And then the Rock Stomper is the X2 SS compound. So a little stiffer, a little thicker, not as flimsy as the X2 S3. So probably a little more weight in the actual tire as well right there. But I'm gonna throw these Rock Stompers back on there and twist this guy up and just double check the clearances with that set. Well, comparison of the width as well. I think that's why these are appearing a little bit shorter than stated, because I've got them stretched with those foams. So they're really, really wide, and they get the weight of the truck. And then you can see these are a little bit narrower. than these guys. Let's see if I put them side by side here, but quite a bit more stretch on the BFGs. But man, they definitely look good stretched out like that. Quick tip here, if you're like me and you run different foams in the front and the rears, so in these I've got firms and mediums, sometimes it's hard to tell by just touch which is which if you have them off the truck and you're swapping them around. And especially if you don't have them weighted unequally. If you've got them weighted with a heavier ring up front, it's easy to tell what goes in front. But for ones that are all the same weight, I typically mark them. I don't know if you can see that, there's a Sharpie, it says front. And you know, either in a paint pen or just a Sharpie, but be careful when you wash them, keep track, because you can wash that off, so you may have to remark them. But you know, it is very difficult sometimes to just tell by touch, you know, which is the firmer or the softer foam. So I advise marking them if they're all the same weight, just to help you out. All right, back with a little wheel tire swap. Got us twisted, compressed. So let's check this clearance. Looks like we're already just barely kissing it right there. Let's see if I can twist this. So yeah, it's definitely gonna barely kind of get into it there. Not too bad, but I think again, like that other set, it'll be able to twist through that just fine. And we'll look at the rear stuff here. But this should be just fine. I think this will probably get up in the fender. So yeah, this is just barely touching the rear, and we're basically in this fender line, and no issue at the front there. So that is nice. I think both of these sets are going to work well with this suspension setup. About the limits of the size, I think, that I could have on there and the width. So pretty happy with that. All right, I think the only thing left to do is power this guy on, take a look at the lights and this Fusion Pro. Oh, those lights look fantastic. Loving the smoked lenses. Be nice if it wasn't just so LED bulb prominent and there was more of a reflector. I think that would be nice if this was filled out with light rather than just a little spot, but you know, I'm pretty picky when it comes to lighting. But so that's the 422 HD. And let's creep this Fusion Pro forward. Just super silent, look at that. Super slow creep. Let's put a little obstacle in front of it and watch the FOC here. Let's see, that's about the minimum I can give it right there. Look at that. Just keeps delivering the torque, maintains the speed. Beautiful. So it's such a good system there. Just creep it on over. Love looking at this thing. All right, I'm running out of table. That's the problem with the larger scale. Little rear end shot here. And again, it would be nice to have some reverse lights. That would be super nice. You know, actually a system that actually had brake lights light up rather than just always lit. But you know, some light is better than nothing, that's for sure. Well, I think that is gonna do it for this kind of build overview of the Midnight Edition K5. And man, I am just super excited about this vehicle. Just looks super cool, and it feels like it's going to perform very well. Just fantastic. And one thing I forgot to mention is I've got it all running on a FlySky GT5 radio. So I've got a little FSBS 6-channel receiver in it as well. So I may end up adding a switch eventually to turn these lights on and off remotely with the radio. maybe some other goodies, I don't know, in the future. But for now, I think I'm pretty dang happy with this Wicked K5. And I don't know what you think. You'll have to let me know in the comments, but this thing is near perfect out of the box. And with a few little tweaks, as you saw, it can be even better. I think both of these wheel tire sets are just perfect for it. Just a great look. And man, nice feel with the Crawler Innovations little Nova foams as always. So anyways, hope you enjoyed yourself. Hope you learned something. And if not, oh well, hope you enjoyed the eye candy at least. But I think that's gonna make it a wrap for this one, but stay tuned for some more RC4 wheel drive Trailfinder 2 action down the road.